So hello, everyone. I'm Sam Tobey. I'm the gallery director of the University Hall Gallery at UMass Boston. This is part of our ongoing online public programming that we've been producing during the pandemic. And today we are welcoming members of the Dorchester Community Fridge, Jamison Cloud and Jackey West Devine, who will be talking about their project and framing ways that artists are doing activist work and creating mutual aid projects, including this project, Dorchester Community Fridge. So when I was organizing this talk, we're hosting it within the context of Professor Erik Levine's Materials, Process, and Ideas course. So thank you, Professor Levine, for hosting us today and for the students for welcoming us to your class. And I wanted to organize this program around the concept and the context of social practice art. So let me just bring up a slide of the fridge. So this is an image of the Dorchester Community Fridge, which is located in Fields Corner in Dorchester, not far from where the UMass Boston campus is located. And so just a bit of a context of social practice art. The field is relatively new in terms of its art historical and critical discourses. It stems from a framework of relational aesthetics, a term coined by Nicholas Bourriade, that suggests that since the inception of conceptual art and the dematerialization of the art object, artworks have been able to take place and be experienced outside the context of the art world, outside of the studio, the gallery, or museum settings. They can instead be experienced and enacted in public spaces and even intervene in systems that are more social and political rather than just formal or aesthetic. In some cases, the medium of the artwork can even be considered to be the public or the audience that participate or activate the systems of social interventions that the artists develop. In many cases, these types of artworks are meant to advance critical thought around society itself and at times attempt to better communities through direct action and mutual aid. Artists like Tanya Bruguera, who is a Cuban artist whose performances and social interventions tend to highlight the challenge power structures and political contradictions to make her viewers more aware of inequities between governments and its citizens. She's been quoted on her practice stating that she pursues a direct experience and exchange with the audience, trying to test if art can really change something. Another artist, Chicago-based artist Theaster Gates, whose visual art practice extends to urban planning, is the founder and director of the Rebuild Foundation, a non-for-profit organization that focuses on culture-driven redevelopment in under-resourced communities in Chicago. Community fridges like the one developed by Jamison Cloud and Fields Corner Main Street in collaboration with others has served as a social practice intervention in providing direct mutual aid for members of the community that are suffering from food insecurity. Fridges and accessible food pantries like this one have been popping up across Boston and becoming a common occurrence across the nation since the pandemic has created significant economic impacts across industries and in public services. Today we're joined by Jamison Cloud and the director of Fields Corner Main Street, Jackey West Devine. They'll be sharing information about the organization first, and then Jamison will present an artist talk about his practice and the Dorchester Community Fridge, followed by a Q&A. So please feel free to share questions in the chat, and we'll field them either during the talk or at the end during the Q&A. Just a bit more of a formal introduction for both Jamison and Jackey. Jamison Cloud is a Boston-based interdisciplinary artist. He has exhibited his work throughout the greater Boston area and volunteered at the local arts community. He was recently an artist in residence at Gallery 263 and has participated in numerous exchange portfolios around the country. Jamison is one of many organizers of the Dorchester Community Fridge, a mutual aid effort in Fields Corner providing free food for the community through donations, contributions, crowdsourcing, food rescue, and community involvement. Jackey West Devine started as executive director of Fields Corner Main Street in December 2019, after 5 years as administrative coordinator at Boston University's School of Visual Arts, where she also earned her MS in Arts Administration, a degree that focuses on nonprofit business administration and cultural enrichment. She's a 5th-generation Bostonian who has lived in Dorchester since 2014. With a background in art and a passion for community, Jackey hopes to leverage her skill set to break down boundaries that keep Dorchester residents from having a connection with the arts, to increase civic engagement, and to create plans that help small business owners realize their goals. So thank you both, Jackey and Jamison, for joining us today. Really, really happy to have you. And thanks again to Erik's class for hosting us for this great talk. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Jackey. So feel free to take over the share screen.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Jackey. Nice to see you.
So as I get my little presentation up here, I just want to tell you that today I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, and then we're going to talk about the organization, and then we're going to talk about some projects that we've done. So my name is Jackey West Devine. I grew up in Somerville, across the river, and graduated in 2001. And at that time, growing up, I always had a connection with the arts. I was always in theater and visual arts, but I really didn't know where my connection to arts would fall in. And I kind of assumed that it would always be something that I grew out of. But by the time I finished my undergraduate degree, I was painting my kitchen and knew I had to find my path. And what I figured out is that my skill set was really in customer service. I knew that I really liked people. I knew that I really wanted to talk to people about their lives and connect them with resources. And so I was able to find my way into the degree at BU. And when I was getting my master's degree there was this tension that we talked about all the time between high art and community art. And that just never really was something I wanted to deal with. I always wanted people to have access to really quality art, to know what a professional art practice could be, but to make it really applicable in the real world. And so when I took this position at Fields Corner Main Street, I felt that this was an opportunity that I could really use, because there's so many artists that live in Dorchester. And now that's what we're doing here at Fields Corner Main Street. So there are so many different roles in the arts, and if you have any questions or don't know exactly how you're going to work in the arts in the future, I encourage you to email me, and I'll put my contact information in the chat later. So Fields Corner is, we like to call it like the heart of Dorchester. It connects to all different kinds of Dorchester. Really, everybody kind of lives here. And it's also a place where people have very deep connections to their cultural backgrounds. And so specifically Vietnamese, but also African-American and Caribbean, and it says Latino here, which is maybe a little redundant with Caribbean for our population, but yeah, and people of all different economic stripes as well. There's some people who have a lot of means, and there's really people who are struggling to get by day by day. So I work for Main Street, which is an organization that is national. We work as in this model that encourages, that works really on 4 pillars, and those are economic development, beautification, organization, and promotion. So beautification is kind of the connection to the arts, really, but we've also used the promotion landscape to promote our businesses within the scope of the arts. And really the work at Main Streets is to encourage this feeling of a downtown that people can go and get their needs met by visiting a Main Street district, food, library, post office. Those are kind of like the cornerstone businesses, but what else is it that you need? And specifically in Fields Corner, that's Vietnamese pharmacies and grocery stores, and people who speak different languages natively and can understand the cultural needs. So there's a lot of Main Streets. As you can see here, we are an accredited program. So you can hear.
Jackie, I just wanted to interject. I don't think if you're going through slides, they're not.
Oh, really?
They're not shared here, yeah.
Okay, hold on just a second. All right, so we already kind of went over this, who I am. Call me if you have any questions or have thoughts. There's the slide that I was saying where it was redundant. And here's just about Main Streets. You don't want me to start over, Sam, you just want me to keep going, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can edit in the slides afterwards.
Here we go. So this is, you can see how many Main Streets there are across the country, and we're all funded through this community block development grant, which is a federal grant that funds all of these organizations, and we all provide some of the same services, which are Restore, that gives businesses $5,000 to update their signage, and technical assistance, but we're all individual nonprofits. So every single organization here that's an accredited program operates as an individual 501c3. And that's significant because we're able to really pivot our organizational goals to the neighborhood. And
Jackie, do these all interact in some way with the arts? Or at least most of
it doesn't have to, but there's nothing that says that you have to do arts. Of course, arts programming is very popular right now, and so I think a lot of us do, but the Main Streets director at Ashmont, prior to the one who's there now, was a trained lawyer. So her take on and skill set that she's going to bring to the organization is obviously different than mine. The lens that I'm thinking about, which, I was hired with that intention and that priority set in mind.
So just for artists in the class, just to think about that too. I just moved to Union Square in Somerville. There's a Main Street here as well. I know they are very focused on arts. So if you're thinking about opportunities for showing your artwork or creating projects, Main Streets, these organizations, I think, are really a great route to think about.
Right. And these are the Main Streets that are just in Boston. My colleagues are all directors at these organizations. So if you live in a different part of Boston and you want to do work in your neighborhood, also talk to me and I can put you in touch with the director, and we can kind of scale things out. So we do rely on each other a lot. We're all focused primarily on encouraging tourism to our districts, encouraging small business, and arts are a great vehicle for that. When I got the job, and so now we're going to talk about the Gallagher building and the transformation, and really the lens I've been able, the vehicle that I've been able to do some art projects in Fields Corner. So when I started this job, we were given the Gallagher building, which is that building on the top right. That's now Dorchester Community Fridge, spoiler alert. And it was an insurance building. It had been for 50 years. And prior to that, it was a diner. And my board at the time thought we would use it for an office, and we would have like pop-up times and people would come and like use it for use the building for just office things. But I didn't think that was the best one, because we had an office with really cheap rent that wasn't temporary, and as we've already discussed, moving is a pain. So I did not want to move for a temporary time period, but also it felt like a great opportunity for finding out what the community really wanted and needed. So our first course of action was to organize a volunteer event over MLK Day weekend. We had about 20 people show up over the course of the building and paint the inside and out. We painted it the colors of Fields Corner Main Street. That was designed by a board member. And the real messaging behind that is that this is no longer the Gallagher building. This is Fields Corner Presents. This is a space for the community. And then after that, we just got the word out. What do people want to do in there? And prior to COVID, we had like a Pop Warner meeting that wanted to happen in there. We had birthday parties. We had a dance class that was going to happen in that space. And then once COVID happened and there was no indoor gathering, we kind of just scratched our head and thought, well, what now? And so we knew we wanted to support the businesses, and there was a big project that had been going around and was very popular. That was a doorstep project, and we wanted to take the front door project was photographers would go around and photograph families in front of their steps in quarantine times. And so we wanted to pair that idea with the businesses and with like the humans of New York. So we, at the board, and I put together an RFP, a request for proposals to do a photojournalism project. And so we posted in places like Higher Culture. We also spread the word locally. We reached out to UMass. And really what we were looking for is somebody who would have the skills to conduct interviews, hopefully in different languages, and then have compelling photography. So we hired a local artist named Johnny Wynn. We actually got really great applications. We had applications for people who were international artists and people who did shows, were really quite professional, but ultimately we decided to hire Johnny because we like to style. But also he speaks Vietnamese, he's from the neighborhood, and he's a social worker by day. So we felt that he would have the skills, the cultural competency that we really wanted along with it, but also the skills to interview people, put people at ease when they were promoting their businesses. And then we also really liked his photography and felt that it would be complimentary for our website and be something we would like to enjoy. But it was huge to have different levels of artists that my board was able to see and really create our priority list. So this is Benny Bienvenides. He owns the Benny Sub Shop, and he's been in the district for over 30 years. And he's very proud of the work that he's done. And next time you get a pizza, go see him. And the next project that came to our doorstep was Black Lives Matter in Color. This was an artwork that was, the process for this was quite different. The owner, the landlord of the building said, I know this artist, I'd love for you to work with him. And he had this idea for this project. He had it at a smaller scale at Ripple Cafe in Ashmont. And we thought it was really beautiful. And crucially, it was also backed by the landlord, which was huge because we were changing the face of the building. And so he had a very clear vision of what he wanted to do. We looked at different opportunities in Fields Corner, and ultimately this was the best for him. We also went through a process to get different people in the community because it's obviously a sensitive topic. But an important topic. And so we wanted different people to be in relationship to this. And we wanted it to be a space, again, that was going to be for community. It was going to be the face of the building. It has a message. It has the artist's message that he really wanted to share about the multifacetedness of Black people who were murdered by the police. And so he wanted to create this space that could be joyful and beautiful. And at the same time, just a few weeks later, I got to know Jamison, and we were talking about the community fridge. So there was a lot of conversation and back and forth about how to tie these two things together and how to best use the space. And here we are with the Dorchester Community Fridge. This, again, is a completely different avenue that for Fields Corner Main Street to work with artists, because this is a grassroots group that was already joined together. And a little art joke that I always tell about the community fridge is that since it was a group of printmakers, I knew that the details would be settled. And it was a-okay for me. But we went through different spaces where it could be, and this was really the best place because of the storage inside and out, the access to the tea, and just the high visibility of it. So it in all three places, it's very different. There's definitely the centering of the arts and all of these three projects, and the artist's view and autonomy. But the way that it comes about in the organization and levels have been very different. With the pillars, it was all Fields Corner Main Street's design and letting the artists bloom in that space. Jorge Morfin, who did Black Lives Matter in Color, had a vision and needed a canvas. And Jamison's work and the group's work for Dorchester Community Fridge has been really wonderful because it's been a true partnership with a group of artists and then the organizational side with me. So with that, I'll leave Jamison to talk about it.
Thank you, Jackie. That's really great. And I'd love to hear about all the other projects that you have going on. And I hope some students here take Jackie's offer up on being in contact with Fields Corner Main Street. So I think it's a really important resource and a great way to get, if you're able to get some projects online, to have your work seen in the community. So Jamison, why don't you take over? Thank you, Jackie, and thank you, Jamison, for joining us.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Sam, for inviting both Jackie and myself to speak to everybody. And thank you, Erik, for allowing us to do so as well. And thank you all for showing up to listen to Jackie and I spiel about all the great stuff Dorchester is doing these days. So if I can get the screen to share, I think I can do it. There we go. Nice. Can y'all see my screen? Okay, cool. So I'm gonna do like a quick little rundown of my own artistic practice, and then we'll jump into the community fridge. So, and again, please feel free to ask any sort of questions that you have. So let me just, okay. So my name is Jamison Cloud. I use he, him pronouns. I've been practicing art for probably the last 10 to 15 years. So I got my degree from Lesley University College of Art and Design, formerly the Art Institute of Boston, down in Kenmore Square. And I got my degree in photography. And during my time in art school, I was just super, finding yourself in many different ways. And my interest varied in so many different things. So I'm just going to kind of show you a quick overview of everything that I've done. So let's see. All right, cool. So as I said, my background is in photography. So this is actually one of the first pictures I took up here in Boston back in maybe 2011, 2012. And a little background about myself. So I was adopted and I was born in Bogota, Colombia, and I grew up and was raised in a small, tiny town in northern New Jersey. And my family is multiracial. My sister is biracial. Both my parents are white, and I identify as Latinx and Indigenous. So coming from a small town, moving up to Boston, as if any of you know, just small town feel to then a big city is super duper just wild and overwhelming in the best sense and also the worst. And so one thing that I was trying to do through one of my projects was really sort of kind of come to terms with like what my cultural identity is, like going through that midlife crisis, but at like 18, 19 years old. So I basically walked the streets of Boston pretty much every weekend, just shooting folks in the Latinx community, trying to introduce myself and integrate myself into something that I thought I wanted to be a part of or needed to be a part of, or just kind of navigating whatever that sort of was. So yeah, this is just a couple images from the series. And as you can see, like I really identified with, you know, street photography. A lot of photographers are really like picky and choosy of like what, you know, format they're shooting. And for me, it was, this entire experience was super nerve-wracking. And looking back at it now, like I put a lot of distance between myself and the subjects, and that was because of a timidness that I was having towards like not being able to bridge the gap of my own kind of internal thoughts of what being Latinx was and kind of what people were outwardly presenting. And so it's a little challenging for sure, and kind of continues to be a little bit for me today.
Jamison, do you mind if I ask?
Yeah, I really kind of took this role of the observer.
Jamison, do you mind if I ask if English is your first language, and was that at all at play in this as well?
I'm sorry.
I was wondering if English is your first language, and that was at all in play.
Yes,
as well.
Sure. So it is not my first language, or English. Yeah, so English is my first language, and I do not speak Spanish whatsoever. So there was also this kind of added language barrier to it as well. Also, is my audio good? Okay, cool. So yeah, there's just all sorts of like layers upon layers of just like dissecting what I thought it was I was looking for. And, you know, and so again, I really like looking back at this now, like I probably took close to 3,000 to 5,000 images of just black and white photos of like the communities here. And a lot of it is like, you know, looking back at it now, like there's a lot of young children, a lot of males. And I think like piecemealing everything together, there's like a level of masculinity that I was possibly searching for. There's a level of just like fear and sort of abandonment and uncertainty in terms of like, you know, feeling accepted in a community that I didn't necessarily know much about, but like presented outwardly as. Yeah, so again, the series is kind of like, it's definitely shifted and changed through the course of my time photographing, and I still kind of continue to do it today, but not so much more, not on like a critical level at all. I think this was just like super, yeah, this was during a time where, again, I felt really unsure of like who I was, and I was having folks kind of talk to me in certain ways of like presenting X way, but not acting this sort of way, if that makes sense. So it was all super fuzzy, but yeah, that was kind of my toes into photography. And I did this from like my freshman year all the way up to maybe my junior-ish year. And during my time at school, as I mentioned, I was super into just like exploring different things. And I really like decided halfway through my, college career that photography wasn't necessarily doing it for me, but I was committed to getting a degree. And but that also just gave me the chance to kind of explore other ways to use photography, right? So I began to dabble in printmaking, and let's see. So this is one of the first pieces, or not one of the first pieces I made of print, but I kind of shifted the narrative of, looking at Latinx communities and myself in it, and kind of focused on my own sort of, just like myself and, desire of what home was and missing home in a small town. And that brought up a lot of things about my socioeconomic background, and all sorts of things entangled in that. So one thing that I am like a hardcore hoarder, my partner likes to say. And so I just love collecting all sorts of objects, tchotchkes, like literally anything you name it. I think objects are so powerful. And they just hold like this, like they hold memory, right? And so I was like collecting like dog hair from my house one summer because I had a lab and she shed so much. And I grew up in like, again, like a very warm and welcoming family, but like, challenges, right? So I was just like collecting all sorts of things that I had no idea what I was going to do with, but I was back in school senior year for the fall, and I was at a loss for what to make. And I was thinking about home. I was thinking about things that made me happy. I was thinking about just like, I can't really pinpoint what I was thinking, but I definitely know I was missing home, and I was thinking about just things to get me through what I needed to get through for the remainder of the semester. And so I decided to kind of create a portrait of my family made out of the hair I collected from my house. So this is a photolithograph of a portrait of my family and I, an abstract portrait of my family and I made out of dog hair that I collected. And so a photolithograph is basically, if you've ever done silk screen or know of like any sort of photo processes, like basically it's just your there's an emulsion on a metal plate, and you're just kind of exposing it to an image or stencil or what have you, and then you print through lithography. So I did that, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Was obsessed. Really liked how it came out, and I did a whole series on it, from portraits to other objects to literally you name it. And then I did this one of a house made of hair, and these are all probably like 18 by 24. And yeah, I was just really, I fell in love with printmaking through all of this. I found a way to kind of combine photography and printmaking. I was able to talk about objects and memory and all these things that kind of held contradictions in themselves, but like I found really true to myself and enjoyed and found pleasure in making. And for those of you who do know, like printmaking is such a process-based art form, right? So I really enjoyed that as well. And then kind of continuing down the exploratory path of art making, I turned this print into like a mini installation where I actually collected the hair, put it in bags, and then I made like a house out of it. And so not the best picture, but again, I was beginning to explore different ways to show the piece, show the work, make it feel more tactile, make it, I was really into this idea of the human experience and like having people touch it, having people smell it, having people, I don't know, do all sorts of wild stuff with it. And so this is, still evolving now. Like I'm currently like hand stitching all of these together. And like the way you play with light on this is really cool. So like against like a white wall or any sort of wall, really, you can kind of get bits and fragments of hair or other debris that was collected through it. So again, just really kind of exploring and navigating through that. Let's see. And then, yeah, so this was post grad. I was out maybe a year or so. And, you know, if you're in your final semesters of school, like you deserve this well-rested break. I say I took like maybe a year off from art making. It was a lot, especially just like I don't know, you're in school, especially now during the pandemic, you're online all the time and working and what have you. And so I think it's really good to get a degree of separation, or at least for myself, it was. And then I came back and there was an opportunity to do, I think it's called Big Ink, and it's a mobile printing press that tours around the country, and they do large wood block cuts and printing demos. So I did this piece, I think in fall of 2018 or fall of 2019, I can't necessarily remember, but it was basically in response to the border crisis under Trump. And, you know, during this time under the administration, I was getting a lot of like, there were a lot of like outward facing tensions that I myself was experiencing here in the city that, you know, I hadn't necessarily felt before. So I just I carved this 32 by 48 block of wood. My first time ever carving a piece of wood too. I don't usually do woodcut or lino cut, but I did this 32 by 48 piece in my teeny tiny bedroom. And yeah, it's kind of a work in progress piece, but this kind of relates to this idea of, you know, my photographic work of understanding cultural identity, speaking up about marginalized voices and kind of what matters, you know, to me. And then fast forward, I think this was 2019. Yeah, this was 2019, so that was 2018. I was an artist in residence at Gallery 263 in Cambridge, and I was really kind of getting back into the process of making art and being excited about art and like all that good stuff that art can do for you, right? And so I was going through just like my photo archives of things to find inspiration for what to make for this like 2-month period that I had to just unlimitedly have access to a space and do whatever it is I wanted. And I noticed I found a lot of like photos of soccer balls that I took while I was kind of excursioning around Boston, you know, between my sophomore and senior year. And so I kind of took this idea of the object again, right, being the soccer ball, and kind of what I identified that with, from like Latinx culture to, you know, masculinity to all sorts of other things that I put on myself, and I think sometimes society puts on, you know, this as well, at least in my head. And then I decided to make my own sort of version of this, and I made a little installation of silk screen soccer balls that, you know, still a work in progress, but it was just really good to kind of like take the idea from, I don't know if I can go back, from like these images here and kind of piecemeal together this idea about the fragility of masculinity, my own sort of curiosity as to why I think that way, in terms of like why I think of a soccer ball to Latin American culture, to how I interpret all that and all those feelings.
And Jamison, what's the image up on the top right, that storefront?
Yeah, so this was just a storefront. I think in Maverick, they had like a soccer shop, and I would frequently go in there to take pictures of the employees and, you know, try and create relationships. But again, I was like super I was super awkward, more so than I am now, but it was really hard to kind of bridge gaps of like language. And I got a lot of times that people felt I don't know if frustrated is the right word, but I think like there was an expectation that I should be speaking Spanish or I should know Spanish. And when I wasn't able to do so, like I was kind of uh, like exiled in a lot of ways. Like conversations really just stopped there and were not necessarily polite. And I'm not saying that's the case for all of my interactions, but for a lot of them, that has been the case and kind of still is the case. So yeah, that's kind of where this piece stemmed from. And then just kind of what I'm working on right now is, I don't know if any of y'all have been to south of the border down in South Carolina, but I frequently, as a child, went, my family's crazy and used to always drive from New Jersey to South Carolina, and we'd stop here. And, you know, as I've gotten older, I find it very offensive that this kind of iconography still exists and that people take pictures and monetize off of it. So right now I'm working on a large 40 by 60 piece that's kind of a reaction piece to what this image is of. So I've cut out a ton of probably like 2,000 to 3,000 little tiles that are going to kind of be a mosaic on this large canvas that I have. And again, it's going to be a response to this iconography and kind of the current times that we're in right now. So that was kind of a quick spiel about what I'm doing, kind of all over the place, but
That's
I
great.
will now, oh, sorry, Sam.
Just thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. And so now we'll just talk about the community fridge, which is how I met Jackey. And so, well, so the community fridge, for those of you who don't know, it's basically similar to like a food pantry, but outdoors. And the way the Dorchester fridge operates is there's no sort of rules or limitations to access. So there are no barriers for folks other than the ones that are kind of unfortunately put upon them from society, right? So we are a grassroots group of local artists, activists, community organizers, neighbors, strangers. And the idea really has been around for quite some time. I think one of the first ones was actually established in Brazil many years ago, but because of the height of the pandemic, as you all know, it's been a challenge for I think everybody, and a lot of things have been unveiled and a lot of issues that have been ongoing for quite some time just, are, getting a lot of light and attention because folks are, struggling. And so my first kind of interaction with this was through, I think, an Instagram post. And then I read an article of a fridge going up in Oakland, California. And I was just super inspired. And I was seeing these things popping up all over. And I remember I have a little community garden plot here in Dorchester on Josephine Street for those who know the area, and it's super cute. But I was gardening, and during this time, that was the only outdoor activity I allowed myself to do. And it was because I was giving myself my own food because I was having financial troubles to support myself to get the food that I actually wanted. And so it was kind of at this moment where I was in my garden and I was oh my God, how cool would it be to have a community fridge? And then that same night I was digging through things, and I went to go do, at that time I was using Amazon. I was oh my God, I'm gonna get my Whole Foods order. And it was astronomical, the amount of money it was. And it's I can't afford this at all. I can't afford anything that I want that's nutritious. And so the next day I spoke with somebody via Instagram who just happened to post about starting a community fridge in Boston. And I was just okay, that'll be fun. I'm really with the cause. I want to help in whatever way I can, or learn more at least. And so Veronica is her name, who I believe is a student at Northeastern, got in contact with them, and things kind of just happened really quickly. I decided that it would be easier to do a community fridge or have one in the neighborhood that I lived, as she lived over in JP. And then I kind of just put a call to action out to friends, family, folks in the area, anybody who really wanted to get involved, and this thing kind of blossomed into what it is today. And so, next slide. So yeah, and then there's all sorts of like things that went into this, right? So we created, and things kind of happened somewhat backwards, but You Live and You Learn, we're a grassroots group. We're a bunch of neighbors and friends, so it's a learning curve for most. But there's so many things that go into this, right? Like finding a host, finding a refrigerator, finding folks who think like-minded like you, creating a safe space for you and your community. What does a safe space even mean? To, gosh, building partnerships with folks who would be kind enough to donate a ton of food to you, to just having to put yourself out there continuously and constantly. And so I'll say, before I met Jackey, we spoke to probably 40 plus folks in the area, with getting no's every single time, which is understandable. There was no traction to community fridges in Boston back in July or August. So it was a new concept for the city. People weren't aware of who we were as individuals, what our intent was. And so all we had to go on was kind of our word. And so, yeah, it was super duper hard, but we met Jackey, and things just, again, happened for a reason. And then like that, we were having to build graphics. So what you see here, a local artist, Jessica Cabanigro, who goes by at Snake Hair. They own their own printing press publishing company in their home here in Dorchester. So they made all the graphics for us to get things going and to spread the word. And we would flyer up and down the streets of Dot Ave and on Adams Street. We started a big social media presence, getting the word out via that way. And so there's all sorts of like different components that went into it. And then when we, secured our host, thanks to Jackey and Fields Corner Main Street, and beginning to kind of really build a relationship, not just one that is like, where it's not like a fruitful partnership and relationship, right? Like, I think there's a level of respect, there's a level of understanding, and there's a level of commitment that really like was needed on both sides in order for this thing to be a success and to be a reality here. So then once we checked off the host thing, there was just like, okay, so are we just going to throw a fridge on the street? What are we going to do? So I have a friend who's also an artist. She's a printmaker who graduated from Mass Art, I believe in 2018, Kayla Gillette, who her dad is a carpenter, and they decided to, they wanted to be involved in some sort of way. So they made an entire shed for the space, and she did all these blueprints for us. And it came in, and it was just super duper helpful to kind of have them there with their, precision and expertise in terms of building, because a few of the folks who, who continually showed up to like the meetings that we were having to get the fridge up and running, like not many of us were fully equipped to do all this ourselves. So it was really great to just include more people on here. So she did this little mock-up, and we did this little mock-up where she did like a digital rendering of the fridge, what we thought it would look like in the space. And so this, I would say, probably happened between end of August to mid-September-ish. And really, again, just utilizing the graphics. And then we just got to building in September 22nd. We did this all. So I will say Gillette Contracting, who's Kayla's father, they built the entire shed on their space, took it all apart, and then rebuilt it or reassembled it, on site that day. So they had all sorts of fancy power tools, drilling things to secure it into the concrete, to supplying all this stuff to us free of cost, in addition to their time free of cost. And so it was really important that, like, being a mutual aid effort, we really strive to like have the community itself, you know, help without sort of any outfacing costs. So from July to September 22nd, we had spent $0 on anything, which is really great because the community really showed up and supported this effort of a group of strangers trying to do something in the community.
And not to interrupt, but I just want to note for the students in the class, you know, it's something to think about here too, where if you have a project in mind, you don't necessarily have to have those skills to be able to execute them. You know, you can collaborate with people who are already experts in building and design. Like you mentioned, Jamison, were mostly printmakers, didn't know how to construct a shed, but were resourceful and able to find somebody to collaborate with to realize the project. So I think that's really important for students to think about. You don't necessarily need to be a specialist in every field or media that you want to work in. You can always find some skillful collaborators.
Totally, yeah. And I would also just add, like, don't be afraid to ask questions if there's like things you're unsure of, or don't be afraid to like speak up about things as well. Like, again, as I mentioned, like through my own artistic practice, I was very timid in terms of like, though I was talking about like racial identity and cultural identity, I was still very timid in terms of wanting to ask certain questions in fear of certain reactions, right? And I think through this entire project, like I've really, through the help of all the other organizers with this and just like having a really solid team around, I've been able to like really open up and ask really anything from the community and from prospective partners. And I think as an artist, it's really important to lean on your crew, lean on your people for support.
I just want to add to that because of my work at BU previously, I had been in this habit of talking to student artists about what the heart of their project was and like what were the things that you have to get through in order to make the art the most true, and then what are the things that you can do to make the logistics go easier. So even though I'm not a professional artist, I am somebody who's used to installation and used to real pragmatic concerns around electricity, so and billing and insurance. And so you know, there is I think a big part of doing community art where it's like pushing forward the idea of like what you need to do in order to make the art itself, and then what can you be flexible on in order to actually make it come to fruition.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, for me, I think my I don't even like saying the word roles, but like what I've been doing lately is like I'm a people person. So I'm always about talking to folks, engaging people about this idea, trying to create fruitful relationships, seeing where folks are at. Where like, yeah, Jackie's been super great on like administrative tasks and help with financials that we're dealing with, because who knew you had to file taxes for a mutual aid group effort thing. I didn't know that. To like, Jessica doing a lot of the graphics, and Joanna, who's one of our members, doing daily deliveries and coordinating all of those efforts, to Mike, who's at the fridge pretty much every single day helping make the space a safe environment for folks, while also putting out like 2,000 plus pounds of food daily to people. So it's like it takes a mountain, or it takes a village, to do something like this.
You said 2,000 pounds of food daily?
Well, that's what we've been doing lately, which is wild.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and I will say that it's not how it started. So we've just, again, been really honest with what we're doing, with who we are, with what our community wants. and people have just been receptive to that. So it's been really great.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of incredible just to see that it's successful, and that, you know, people are using this resource, but also that just highlights, right, how necessary it is, and maybe how other public services are somewhat falling short, and that, you know, creative solutions like this, driven by the community itself, is helping kind of bridge that gap, right?
Totally. Yeah. And I think there's, you know, through this experience, and I'll get to this in a little bit, but like there's like levels of bureaucracy that a lot of like folks who are in the food world here like have to go through, and we are not abiding by any of that. So we are strictly really just being intuitive and really assessing and asking like our neighbors like what it is they want. Like it's really that simple. But I'm just going to go through a couple photos of just like the finished installation. So amazing shed that they built for us. Amazing final view of the fridge. Sorry for the pixelized version of it, but there she was day one, or there they were day one. And yeah, as you can see, like we've really pushed a lot of food through, and a lot of this is through, again, relationship building, you know, being aware of like being conscious of like the partnerships that you're creating with like fruitful people and like organizations who are actually doing the work in the community and have been doing the work in the community, and who are, you know, who have the same morals and ideals that the folks involved with the Dorchester Community Fridge have. So just a couple pics of what we've been doing. Really great. And as I mentioned, yeah, we've been pushing a lot of food through lately, which is fantastic. But as you can see, pretty much we go from something like this to pretty much a bare fridge nearly within hours, if not an hour. So again, the demand is high, the need is high. And I will say, like, I'll speak for myself, I am not an expert on food insecurity in the city of Boston. Like, that is not my background. That is not, I'm just not well versed in it. I can only speak to what I've seen, what I've experienced myself, and what our community members have said. But there is like a really high need, and particularly from the pandemic, you know, there already was an estimated, I think, 8 or 9% increase of food insecurity here in Boston. And then due to the pandemic, it doubled. So with folks losing jobs or having to feed multi-generational households with one income, to a myriad of just challenges that this pandemic brought, like the need was here, and the demand, you know, like through food pantries who are doing really great work, through other like food rescue organizations like Loving Spoonfuls, like those are all kind of like nonprofits to or have like some sort of funding. And so there are like barriers that that folks have to like overcome in order to actually get X amount of food or get whatever it is they're looking for. And why I think the fridge has been so successful is like there are really no parameters for who can access it and how much they can access. And that's been really huge. It's been huge to the community, but it's also been a challenge to like communicate that to people, if that makes sense, because there are sometimes tense situations that arise in terms of folks questioning, you know, one's need over another. And so we do a lot of work around, we've been doing a lot of work around or talk around like de-escalation and all sorts of things to kind of continue to create this safe space. And we've done a pretty good job, but I just want to show these pictures because though it is really great that we are pushing a lot of food through the fridge, and though this is like a really great, you know, effort on behalf of just like neighbors working together, right? Like the need is still there, and this is only a tiny fraction of work being done to kind of combat what is going on here in the city. And so, oh, sorry, Sam.
I was just going to say, just in consideration of the time, I was wondering if we could open it up to Q&A.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, thank you so much for that great overview of both your practice and the project at Dorchester Community Fridge. I think it's really important work that you're both doing. So thank you for helping support our community and creating access to food for folks who really need it. So just the first question that I actually see in the chat, folks are able to write in there if you have any questions. You can also, if you're open to being recorded, included in the recording of this that we'll post on YouTube, you can also turn on your camera and interject. But Isabella asks if you're a part of the community pantry in the Old Colony housing apartments, if you're connected with that in any way.
I don't believe we are. I've never actually heard of that.
So might be somebody to partner with or look into further.
Totally.
Yeah. So Erik, do you, or if there's any students in the class too that are curious about asking other questions, feel free to interject.
I was curious if you have any issues with vandalism or people that don't really play nice, and if it's open 24 hours a day, you said there were certain relationships between who needs what more, how you would negotiate that, but moreover, at least sometimes I've been told, I think the expression is something like, all good deeds, the road to hell is paved with the best of intentions, or something along those lines. So I'm just wondering if you've come across anything like that.
Yeah, I think pretty much on a daily basis. But I think one thing we've really stuck with is continuing to advocate and communicate for the folks who are experiencing that and who are like a little disgruntled about what's going on. And so again, we've partnered with all sorts of great folks who have been doing the work here in the city. So Project Bread offers a lot of assistance to us. So they help enroll folks into the SNAP program, which basically gives them X amount of money based on their income monthly. So we have pamphlets about that, and we're somewhat well versed in that literature that we can kind of explain it to folks as well. But I think people kind of because we're in such a whirlwind of a time, people, once you break it down to them, folks are more understanding of being okay, maybe I won't yell at this person, or I won't take this out of this person's hand again. That was wrong of me to do. And so I think clear communication as best as we can is always our number one go-to. And we haven't been vandalized, thankfully, but and I think that's because, again, the space and environment we've created is really, inclusive to all, and folks in the neighborhood, in a way are protective of it themselves. So I don't think I foresee that being an issue.
So you found you brought out the best in people and not the worst. In other words, they'll take 1 gallon of milk instead of 3 or 4.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
But I think the mission of the community fridge is very clear, that there's no barrier to access to food. And it's about creating, there's kind of this thought about creating a social contract. And previously to the community fridge in Fields Corner, we had been looking for ways to encourage the homeless and addicted populations in Fields Corner to kind of buy into a little bit more social engagement. And I would, social responsibility to not engage in violent acts against people who are shopping in the district and things like that. And there was a lot of work about who we could bring in to be a social worker to address people's needs and get them the help that they need. But ultimately, I think with a project like this that just addresses such a basic need for life, this population in our neighborhood feels taken care of, and so they feel more towards everyone in the neighborhood. And I would say it's definitely visible how much violence has gone down. But I think for Jamison and I and the people who organize the community fridge, there's not a level of judgment about what people take. And there's a commitment to non-judgment about what people take and when they take it.
That's really important. It's, of course, it's really elemental. You know, people are literally dealing with survival, you know, based on what food they're able to access, you know, for their health and for their safety. So, and completely valid that tensions are high right now, especially. Yeah, any students have any questions in the class?
I have a question actually.
Yeah, please, Sean.
Yeah, so I was just wondering if you guys are like trying to focus on providing like healthy food, sort of like non-processed food, if that's like a goal at all.
Yeah, I'd say that's definitely been one of our key like driving factors, is that there is no immediate grocery store in Fields Corner. They just took out an American Food Basket that was replaced by a Target, which also has a small grocery store in it. But to that side, there is like influx of cost shopping for produce at Target. So the closest grocery store I think is either a Daily Table, which is probably like 3/4 of a mile walk from Fields Corner, or a Stop and Shop, which doesn't have accessibility to, you know, train or bus. So it's walking up and down a very large hill. So
there's a Price Right in the market in the Fields Corner Mall now.
Yeah, and so again, like we've partnered with a lot of farms in the area, which was really great. So we're getting a lot of fresh local produce, and we're trying to be really mindful of just like the various cultures that are here in Fields Corner. So making sure like we're providing culturally appropriate food to folks here, or at least so they have that option. So I think definitely healthy foods is definitely on the top of our minds.
Sean, for your boxing training, it means you can, empty the fridge there, or at least take something.
All right, yeah, I might stop by.
Yeah, great question, Sean. And it's interesting, hearing you talking about just accessing, healthy food and partnering with farms, and just bringing this conversation back to social practice. Did you ever think that this would be an element of your work, doing this kind of like community building and like logistics and bureaucracy that you're handling?
No, literally no. But I think, I think I said this like a million times, but I think like it was because of like the support of like, folks I surrounded myself with, and it just sometimes you just fall into a role that is unexpected and you just run with it, and that's kind of what this has been for me. And I think it's social practice, like bringing conscious awareness to like, okay, how do we make folks in our neighborhood become more sustainable on their own by growing their own vegetables, or having equal access to community garden space or to land here in Boston, right? So like we've now secured a couple spots up on Washington Street, which is not too far from the fridge, to begin planting food solely for the fridge, and are working with community activists and organizers who are all about food sovereignty and food justice, to kind of help us, continue to navigate this really sticky mess that we're in. So,
Sam, could I say something? Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's nothing like, of course, Christo and Jean-Claude, but the bureaucracy, of course, their work was all about navigating bureaucracy, right, for decades, just to get a single piece done. So, obviously, social practice, I think this is much more directly and community engaged, and you can talk about the generosity in both kind of bodies of work, if you will, but that having to deal with people and laws and bureaucracy and attitudes and feelings that literally took decades to change, at least for their work, as I'm sure can be difficult and challenging for you on a level like this. But it's also interesting that, like you say, you have the artistic freedom where you're not constrained or constricted by other, specific food outlets, if you will, or pantry outlets, that I think artists can kind of navigate that in a more kind of free way. Sometimes they get away with it, sometimes they don't. Of course, there was the guy in Massachusetts, the artist that went into a bank, tried to rob the bank, and said, "Oh yeah, it was for a work of art," and the judge said, "Nah, I don't think so." So there are limits, but I'm glad to hear that at least you have a little more freedom and you're not so constricted by a lot of the other kind of administrative bureaucracies that may impede other people trying to do good deeds and things.
It's been a great partnership because, my real relationship, the city handles most of our money. And so I have deep relationships with the city. And so it's nice that when there's questions, of course, the community fridge does a lot of homework and they come very well informed. But if there is a matter of cutting red tape, that's kind of my job, is to try to cut red tape for what people want to do in the neighborhood.
And Jamison too, you mentioned there was almost a month and a half of time period where you hadn't spent any money on the project. Like the city can't do that. Public services can't really do that. So just to get back to this idea of like art being able to affect real change in communities, and being, just a push to make our communities and our governments to consider art as a really essential resource that they can be utilizing more often. I think that this is a great argument for that, of just, being able to create, positive solutions for very real problems that oftentimes it takes governments, years to even be able to look towards, not even just solve or affect change in. So just want to thank you both for that. Maria asks if there's been any focus on culturally specific food.
No, she said she was about to. I think she was about to ask, but Jamison already answered that. Unless I'm wrong, I think that's the way I saw it come in.
Okay, gotcha. So yeah, do you any closing thoughts, either from you, Jackey, or from you, Jamison? I think we have to wrap pretty soon.
I don't. I just want to say thank you to everybody for taking the time to, listen to my little spiel about my own art practice, but more importantly, I think about, the community fridge and, the importance of community involvement. And I encourage folks to get involved with their local mutual aid groups, if at all possible, and to not be afraid to speak up and ask questions. So thank you all.
Yeah, thank you both for joining us.
Thank you, Sam, for organizing it. Thank you, Jackey and Jamison. And I guess I will see you guys also next Tuesday for something else, a different class. So appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. And Erik, do you have anything else that you want us to voice to the class, or is it okay if we sign off here?
No, I'll just address them. No, that's fine. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you all. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you everybody for attending. I'm Sam Toby for the University Hall Gallery at UMass Boston. This was the artist talk for Dorchester Community Fridge with Jamison Cloud and Jackey West Devine. Thank you very much. And everybody take care.
Thank you guys. You too. Thanks.